we've been going through Kings, the book of Kings, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But I just wonder if you could bring up the PowerPoint, David. So, yeah, thank you, that's great. I wanted to start by, I was kind of interested in terms of us doing the worship, the way in speaking about coming before Jesus. Because actually my first question is, what is the state of your heart this afternoon? What was your heart like when you came into the building this afternoon? And I don't mean your physical heart, I mean the place where your hopes and your desires, or your fears and your motivations live. What are the things you're attached to? What are the things that in your mind occupy your thoughts and your longings? And I don't mean necessarily just your fleeting hopes or your fleeting feelings. I mean, what are the things that you're really longing for in your heart, or what are the things that you really worry about? The Bible says that the heart is the wellspring of life, and if you do follow Jesus and you're in the room and you're a follower of Jesus, at some point in your life he will have captivated your heart. And I guess the question is, does he still like that today? And if you've never known Jesus, or you've drifted away from him, then I guess the question I'd ask you is, who holds your heart now? What is it that captivates your heart? When we talk about someone having heart, we probably saw, some of you might have watched a marathon this morning or whatever, but we talk about people that have heart when they're running a marathon and they get to a quitting point, are the people that get past that point of difficulty and hardship and they run on to the finish line. That's what we say when someone's got heart. And we say someone is cold-hearted when they shut other people out of their life, because they shut out other people's pain. And we say that they're soft-hearted when they connect, when they've got compassion for others. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty much someone who probably has been in both those places at points. And we also have what we call half-hearted, which is where we turn up to something, we show some commitment, but we're not fully there, not fully present. We hold back something. And maybe you feel like that towards Jesus. Maybe you feel like that towards God, that you're either half-hearted or you're hardened to him. Or maybe your heart is heavy or restless, it's burdened with life, past wounds, or maybe the bigger issues in the world. Just take a few minutes to think, what is it that hardens my heart? That is the state of my heart today. What matters to me? Where do I turn when things are going hard? What can't I let go of? What can't I live without? What fills my mind in those idle moments, those quiet moments? What do I crave and long for? Because these would be the things that capture your heart. And I say, sometimes when I look inward and look at that, I'm not always proud about what I find. So who is getting the affections of your heart this afternoon? See, there's one thing that I am confident of though, and that is that we have a God who loves us. The God who sent his Son for our sakes. And what I'm confident of is he wants to know us, and he wants to know his heart for us today. I'm confident of that. In Jeremiah 17 it says, the heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? We've been working our way through this book of 1 and 2 Kings in the Bible, and Kings is the story of God's people with a wandering heart. It's a heart that progressively moves further and further away from God. And because they move further and further away, what happens is that death and decline follow this people, the people of Israel, God's chosen people. And it starts the book with this first king, King David, who is the greatest of kings. And we've looked at him a little bit. And there are, it starts with his death, and then it moves. And with Solomon, what we see outwardly is we see signs of prosperity and success. There were these outward signs of that. But actually, there's also this growing sickness in the heart of the people of God, and he leads them further away from devotion to God. And that's like what happens in the heart sometimes. What is unseen in the heart often doesn't show itself for everyone to see. And you can see that, can't you? Think about an intimate relationship. Someone you might know has had a breakup in a relationship. Actually, it happens in the heart, and things change in the heart, and then it's the outward stuff that works itself out, sometimes months or years later. And you sometimes, though, you do get a glimpse of what's in a person's heart. Sometimes in those moments of stress or pressure, when it's not easy to hide what is deep down inside of us, we let those things out. We have a little dig at someone, we say a word of gossip, or we drop a compliment, a comment, just to make sure we get praised. Jesus summed it up and he said, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And Solomon, this second king, his heart was led astray from trusting in God, because he loved foreign women, and he collected this group of foreign women, and he also accumulated huge amounts of wealth. But his wealth was a blessing from God. It was actually from God that he got the wealth, but he ignored the warnings of the Bible that said that, and his blessings, he gradually accumulated more and more, and he became in pursuit of self-reliance rather than trusting in God. And he was moving further and further away. And his choices led to people turning away from God. And that's what it can be like for us. We feed our hearts with things from around us. So we can feed our hearts with the stuff that we watch online, or we can feed our hearts with the music that we listen to, or we can feed our hearts with the company that we keep. They all affect what goes on in our hearts. So Solomon, he has a son, and he passes on the kingdom to his son, and he turns out to be even more foolish than his father. And what he does is he starts treating the people in a brutal way, and they start to rebel, they revolt, they say, we're not putting up with this any longer. And Kings, this book of Kings that we've been looking at, is God's perspective on this moment, as what happens is this king and this kingdom starts to divide. And it's this moment in history where the kingdom splits that we're going to look at today. So there's a man called Jeroboam who we're going to spend the rest of today looking at, and he is an employee of Solomon. He's like he's one of his top guys, and he raises him up, and he says he puts him in charge of things. And we're going to read just from 1 Kings 11, which is basically where Jeroboam has an encounter with a prophet called Ahijah. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way wearing a new cloak. And the two of them were going out alone in the country. And Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing, and he tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I'm going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. But for the sake of my servant David and the king and the city of Jerusalem, which I've chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have 1 tribe. And I will do this because they've forsaken me and they've worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Molech, the god of the Ammonites. And they've not walked in obedience to me, they've not done what is right in my eyes, and they've not kept my decrees and laws as David, Solomon's father, did. However, as for you, I will take you, and you will rule over all that your heart desires, and you'll be the king over Israel. And if you do whatever I command you, and you walk in obedience to me, and do what is right in my eyes, by obeying my decrees and commands, as David my servant did, I will be with you. I will build you a dynasty as enduring as the one that I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. So Ahijah's words, they blow up Jeroboam's world. See, he's no longer the favoured employee of Solomon, and he needs to flee, and he flees for his life into Egypt. With this promise that Jeroboam flees to Egypt, he has to wait it out for this moment. And the moment comes when basically what happens next is Rehoboam then takes control of the kingdom with Solomon's death. And at that moment, Rehoboam makes this decision to oppress the people even harder, make them work harder. And so out of his hardness and his arrogance, Rehoboam, his heart brings about this split in the kingdom. And at this point, the kingdom splits. And this has all been foretold to Jeroboam. But it's been brewing in the heart for some time, and then suddenly it shows itself in the kingdom. And what happens is the two out of this one nation that God had taken out of Egypt, it's split now and broken in two, and these children of God are now warring against each other. And as I say, at the beginning of all this, Jeroboam has this incredible promise from God that his part will be like that of David, the king, the great king, if he walks and promises and fulfills what God has asked him to do. So what does he go and do with this promise? And we move on to read the next part of the story in 1 Kings 12. Then Jeroboam built Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim, and he dwelt there. And he also went out there and he built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now the kingdom may return to the house of David. If these people go and offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, the heart of this people will turn back to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah. And they'll kill me, and they'll go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Therefore the king asked advice, and he made 2 calves of gold. And he said to the people, It's too much for you to go back to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And he set one of them in Bethel, and he set the other in Dan. One is in the north, and one is in the south of his territory. Now this thing became a sin for the people, and he went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And he made shrines in the high places, and he made priests from every class of people who were not the sons of Levi. Jeroboam ordered a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the feast that there was in Judah, and he offered sacrifices on the altar. So he did this at Bethel, sacrificing the calves that he'd made. And at Bethel he installed the priests of the high places which he had made. So he made offerings on the altar which he had made at Bethel on the 15th day of the month, in the month which he had devised in his own heart. And he ordained a feast for the children of Israel, and he offered sacrifices on the altar, and he burned incense. And it might seem really strange to us that what he goes and does, Jeroboam, in choosing to keep the people loyal to him, that he makes these golden calves. It's a place where he wants to gain their loyalty, and he wants them to come and worship. And in our culture, we're not so used to people going to worship in that way, of showing their worship in that way. But Jeroboam lived in a time where worshipping with idols made of wood or of precious metals would have been something that was pretty typical. So we might not identify with a golden calf, but an idol is anything that's inflated to function as God in our lives. It doesn't mean that the thing itself is bad. It just means when it functions like God in place of God, it becomes an idol. An idol is not simply statue of wood, stone or metal. It's anything that we pursue when we love and pursue in place of God. So what I'd like us to do is just for a few minutes in looking at that passage is 2 questions. So I just want you to turn into little groups of 4. And the 2 questions, Joel's going to pass out some post-it notes and some pens. And the first question is, what motivated Jeroboam in that passage to take the choices that he took? And then Jeroboam sets before the people an idol of worship. But I want to ask ourselves, what in our culture are the things that we are set before us as objects of worship? So I just want us to spend a few minutes just talking about that in little groups if you turn round. So what are the things in our culture that set up of idols? And write those things on post-it notes, and we're going to stick them up on my beautiful drawing that I've made. The 2 questions are, what motivated Jeroboam in his actions? And Jeroboam sets up a calf as an object of worship. What are the things in our culture that are set up as the things to aspire to, the things that this is what we worship? Okay, so we've got a few up there, and I think I think we'll probably have some that are very much duplicated. We've got things on there like a thirst for power, and I guess we see that. We do see power being elevated as something to be aspired to. And then we've got also things like social media popularity being an important one, elevating yourself up and getting the most likes and the most followers. Successes like savings, house, car, the latest stuff, career status. We've got money, popularity, fame, lust, money, sex and power, wanting people's loyalty. So this was what, we'll come on to that, Jeroboam's own anxieties, but greed, not trusting God, I'll do things my way. And then we've got other idols of money, what people think, image, family. Reputation, power. I'm going to take that one. Because I think, as I looked at Jeroboam as a guy, he comes across as pretty bad in the Bible when you start reading his life. But actually, as I started to read and study him, I sort of kind of noticed that actually some of the things that influenced his decision making, I could relate to and I could see in my own life. And I asked the question, what were some of the reasons that Jeroboam turned the way he did and followed the way he did? And the first one was one where Jeroboam, he was ruled by his worries and his fears and not by God's promises for his life. He'd been given this promise by Ahijah, and yet, even with that promise, what he does is he fears that the people are going to turn from him. As someone said, that fear of revolt, the fear that people are going to turn loyalty back to Rehoboam, and that's what drives his decision making. So he was ruled firstly by fear and worry. And I guess that's really easy to see, isn't it? Because he was the popular choice. Once they revolted, they were fed up with Rehoboam's rule. So this group of people picked Jeroboam to take on the kingship. And it's the danger, isn't it, of basing your identity then on the popularity that you have with others. When you're liked, everything feels really fine. But it's tempting to find our security in how popular you are with people. And your heart can be so easily then ruled by people's approval of you. What will they think of me? One of the young people that I take to a Bible study that we go weekly to shared how they were sharing about their Christian faith in school, and they were getting a lot of grief for it, and they had to stand up for their views amongst their peers. But it wasn't an easy thing to do. Our hearts are easily caught up with how others see us. And I've found with the recovery house, as Jonathan said, I've had really tough conversations with neighbours, and it's hard when people assume the worst of you or they disapprove of what you're doing and the decisions you're making. And I felt it in church, in leading a church and in my workplace too, having to confront people when actually I crave to be liked. Jeroboam's fear of man drives his choices. And he worries people will go back to Jerusalem, they'll turn back to this other king, and they'll kill him as well. So his heart's ruled not by just fear of rejection, but actual death. And I've been reading about the underground church in Iran. I'm just reading about it at the moment. And Christians who are risking arrest, and they're risking much worse because they love Jesus and they believe that Jesus has asked them to gather together as the church. And I just asked myself the question, would I risk my life like that? Would I risk coming to this building if I knew there was fear of arrest or something worse happening to me or my family? Is my heart that in love with Jesus? How many of us, I wonder, constantly worry about what other people think about us? We crave approval, or we fear what will happen to us if we take a stand. See, Jeroboam wasn't anchored in God's promises to him at all when he tries to secure the kingship by choosing people-pleasing as his way and his self-made plans, and he's driven by fear and he ignores the promises of God along the way. And the second thing is that Jeroboam formed a god and a religion to fit his own agenda. And there's a bit of a thing if you read through the couple of chapters, chapter 11 and chapter 12 of thing, you'll notice that there's both Rehoboam and Jeroboam go and seek advice from other people. And it's really interesting because actually when you read, there's a real contrast that emerges between the advisors that they seek out and people that speak the truth of God's word to them. And basically, they always go with the ones that they like and that flatter what they want to hear. And I guess I worry about that from my own heart. Do I seek out people that challenge me and confront me sometimes? Or do I just seek out people that are just going to tell me what my heart has already decided? See, our hearts, I think, are in danger of that. But after taking advice, Jeroboam builds this more convenient religion for them. He says, you don't need to go off to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was in the south and he was in the north. He says, you don't need to travel that far. I'll set something up for you more locally. And particularly if you look back through that passage, you see this word keep coming up time and again, made. He made this, and he made that, and then he made the shrines, and then he made the priests, and then he made the festivals, and then he made the calves. Everything is crafted and controlled by Jeroboam. And leaders like Jeroboam want that control. They want the credit for everything. And his story mirrors an earlier one where Aaron, who in Exodus, who makes the golden calf himself, where Moses is up in the mountain. And again, Aaron does it because the people are complaining and he needs to deliver something for them. So he produces this idol. And God's given a backseat to something more convenient. Outward ritual replaces heart devotion. What Jeroboam does and Aaron before him is shape a religion that serves their own needs. And I often notice in my own heart drifting in that way too. How many times have I left a church meeting evaluating it by what did I get out of that? The worship was good, the talk was too long, must have been me talking again. I just justify skipping things because they're not convenient or they don't feel right to me. Again, it seems to be my preferences become the thing that I worship. My experiences become the measure of what is most important to me. And I find that they become central. That's the problem. It's not that commenting on those things might not be appropriate or useful at times, but they become the central thing. How was it for me, rather than did I go to exalt Jesus, the King of Kings? And Jeroboam, he understood one thing. He understood that hearts are made to worship things. And he manufactured a DIY religion to keep people loyal. And he chose significant religious locations, and he ditched things that didn't serve him. And he shrinks God down to fit his needs. And I wonder, am I in danger of doing the same? Our world is full of objects that we make into idols. Created things, we've listed some of them off, but anything can become our everything. It could be money, power, sex, appearance, comfort, relationships. Anything can become our everything. How aware are we of the things that are competing in our hearts? What would we be devastated to lose? For Jeroboam, it was the popularity of the people and survival. And Jesus understood this. He understood the things that grip us. And in his teaching, he's always going on about the heart. And what's focus is on the heart. That's why suffering is so helpful. Actually, it can be a help. Because actually what suffering does is it brings to the surface the idols that we cling on to. Hard times show us what we actually worship. Our hearts were made to worship, but only God is there who's going to be able to satisfy it. And the other thing to notice is Jeroboam's actions, read in a single paragraph, but I doubt they happened overnight. Things like making a gold calf takes time. Things like appointing the priest takes time. There were festivals that happened months later. And I guess there's that danger as well for all of us that the heart, the things that captivate the heart often grow over time, gradually. Jesus says it's like weeds that grow and choke us. Bad habits usually start with small compromises until they take hold. And I often find my heart drifting. Even religion becomes an idol, and how I appear to others, performing spiritual duties to earn credit with God. And when I fail at it, I hide, afraid of what people might think. And all of this reveals truly what holds my heart. So I think, for me, and I don't know about you, but I think there's a bit of Jeroboam in all of us. Hearts that are sometimes overwhelmed by our fears and our worries, and hearts that drift into shrinking God to fit into our needs. And later references in Kings use Jeroboam as a kind of reference point, a summary of hearts that are turned away from God. So there's a phrase that you start to read through Kings called the way of Jeroboam. It's a label that's used, and it says Jeroboam's life becomes this pattern. The people he influenced, the later kings, followed the way of Jeroboam. And sadly for him, he never turned back to God. He never had a change of heart. Jeroboam's choices that he made in the everyday became a way. And our lives are shaped by what our heart worships. So the question I have for you is, who is shaping my heart? Who is influencing my heart right now? What comes first in my heart? What controls me? What motivates me? What moves me? What are my priorities when I'm under pressure? So today, reading Jeroboam, I've seen more of myself in him than I like to admit, and my heart drifts, and it's more divided in its loyalties than I care to admit. My heart's a muddle of contradictions. So what's the answer to these wayward hearts of ours? Well, one of Jesus' followers, Peter, when he first met Jesus, the first thing he did when he encountered Jesus' heart is he cried, "Away from me, I'm a sinner." And through the next 3 or 4 years, Peter was one that he followed Jesus, but he messed up time and time again. But Jesus didn't go away from Peter, but he invited Peter to follow him. And Jesus died for him even as Peter had denied him. The Bible says the heart is sick, but it also tells us Jesus is a cure. And Jesus says this, "I am the way, the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except me." And Jesus says, I am the way. The way of Jesus is different from the way of Jeroboam. See, Jesus was wholehearted in his way. He was wholehearted. He wasn't swayed by what people thought, and he didn't place his confidence in the praise of people, and he didn't turn away from the thing that when he was facing rejection or abuse, and ultimately he went and gave up his life. His heart is one I can trust. His heart is one I can be sure of. Jeroboam was promised a kingdom by God, but he failed to trust God and he went his way. And he never turned back to God. But Jesus offers us his way. What do we realise? When we're heading in the wrong direction, what do you do when you're heading in the wrong direction? He just says, turn to him. That's what we said right at the beginning. That's what Jonathan said. We turn our gaze to him. And so I keep asking myself, what is it I'm doing? Am I turning to God? Am I, in my day-to-day, am I turning to God? Am I allowing him to shape who I am and shape my heart? The kings repeatedly ignored that, the promises and the warnings of scriptures. Solomon was self-reliance and wealth. For Jeroboam, it was popularity and losing power. I wonder what it is for you. The other day we were travelling back from Bristol, and we'd had a brilliant day, and then as soon as I got in, I was quite tired, got in the house, and as soon as I got in the house, the first thing I did was I snapped at Joel, whatever. And I suddenly, there was no good reason for it, and we'd had a brilliant day together, and I just realised, I could have justified it in any which way, but what I realised was my heart is deceptive, and under pressure it shows the worst of itself. And when I try and track how I try and stick to Jesus over the last few weeks, I've been thinking about this, this heart relationship with Jesus. And as much as I try and turn myself to Jesus, I find myself unsticking and turning away from him and doing things in my own strength. And I realise my heart is just such a muddle. But the good news of Jesus for me is that I found someone whose heart is sure and certain. That's who Jesus is. He's unwavering in his determination to make himself known to me if I seek him, if I turn to his way. He knows my heart. He knows the muddle of it. He knows the muddle of every heart in this room. And he sees the things that I'd rather hide, the fears that I crave, things I fear, the things I crave. But he still said, I've sent my son. Jesus chose the way of the cross for us. And I believe that there's grace for the hardest of hearts, the darkest of hearts, the hearts that are chasing in every direction. And we just have to turn away from our way, the Jeroboam way, and we turn to Jesus' way. And that's where I want to finish. Is that I want to just finish with communion. I'm just aware of the time. Can we just have that surrender song just playing in the background again, David? But just as we take communion together, if you're a follower of Jesus, if you know that you want his way in your life, then come and Felicity, would you just get things ready over there on the table? We're just going to do that. And as you do it, as you take communion, what I just want to encourage you is to say that actually if you notice your heart is going cold to God, or your heart is divided, or there's stuff in your life that you feel like I need to turn from those things, then as you take communion, just bring those things to God. It may be it's really helpful to get someone else to pray with you around it. The Bible talks about sharing with one another and carrying each other's burdens, and so there's definitely a place for that. But my encouragement is do business with God in your heart. There's nothing he wants more than your heart, and he's shown you his heart for you in the death of his son. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, if you've chosen his way, come and break bread. If you're not, if you've got questions still, then look at the person of Jesus. Look as you read the stories of Jesus. My encouragement is look at his heart. Look at his heart in terms of his heart to his Father and his heart for people. Because I guarantee that you will meet no one like him in your life.